Hello, everyone, and welcome to Human SOS Show, episode 151. Today, we're going to be talking about Are you an all or nothing changer? And it's a topic that Anton and I have addressed before. And I apologize that Anton's feeling a little bit under the weather this morning, so it's going to be just me today. But this is a topic that is near and dear to our heart. Hope that everyone that will join us will be sure and let us know where you're joining from, and be sure and ask questions, make comments, because this is a topic that we're interested in, and your engagement, of course, makes for a much better show. Welcome, Jane. Glad to have you with us. And from the title, Are You an All or Nothing Changer, has to do with our approach to change in our life. And one of the concepts or principles that we at Perspective Force have is what we call 10% principle. And what we find, and through different experiences as well as scientific research, that most people, when they approach change, if you do a major wholesale kind of change in your life, which is quite often associated with like diets, is that they are not durable. They're not long term successful. And the reason being that we're trying to change too much at one time. And so the key is we need to look at identifying areas of change, find the areas that are most important, and begin to have a target goal of 10% change in that area. So 10% principle is what we talk about. And the concept of all or nothing is a challenge, because quite often, if we are in and try to make a change and change all of it at one time, the likelihood of our success is limited, because we are not designed to be changing in that fashion. There are rare moments where people will actually have a radical change, and it will be all at one time and be very remarkable and pronounced. But those are rare exceptions. Most of the time, when we need to change small steps at a time. Because think about how we get to a place where we are that we need to change from. Rarely do we change in a way that is very dramatic and that we then need to change to improve. For example, again, the weight loss and diet is a good example. We rarely, in fact, it's not even possible that we have a significant weight gain in a very short period of time, within a few days or something like that, that cause us to need to adjust our weight level. Good morning, Lydia. Glad to have you with us. So, what happens is that rather than take the time, the steps that we need to, we try to make this one massive change. We decide to throw out all the so-called bad food in our refrigerators and our cabinets, and we're going to make this dramatic change to improve our eating or to have weight loss. The other form is we go from being pretty sedentary in our lifestyle to attending a gym with the goal that we're going to be there 7 days a week. Welcome, Sharon. Glad to have you as always. And so we approach this change by doing all these dramatic things all at one time. And as a result, what happens is the great majority of the time we fail. And what's bad is that it is real common that when we do, that we fail even worse than when we started. And so, again, the principle 10% principle, 10% change. So, what we want to do is we want to dig around and find the roots of the issues that we're dealing with. And let's say having a sedentary lifestyle. We have led that sedentary lifestyle now for a while. It has happened gradually. Most people don't just go from being active to inactive overnight. Exception is if you are ill and have to go into hospital or something like that, then you might have that happen. But generally, it just happens over time. We get busy and we let our movement go. And we like the term movement rather than exercise, because exercise quite often has a mental emotional stigma to it. But movement and what that movement looks like will vary depending on person. And so anyway, we gradually go from being an active and involved person and to a point where we spend a lot of time sitting and being inactive physically. Okay, so the key is we identify what is our obstacle to changing in terms of movement. And it might be that there's been some physical trauma in our life that has caused us to be more limited in physical movement. Could be our schedule that has become too crazy. It may be that there is some emotional basis for it, that we have maybe given up on staying healthy. Whatever that is, identify that root cause. Welcome, Professor Jagdish and Rafia. Glad to have you here today. And again, our topic is, are you an all or nothing changer? And what we're talking about is the principle of 10% change. And again, Anton would normally be here and was planning to be here and became ill or under the weather overnight. And so we're wishing Anton a quick recovery. So this 10% change is so critical. Another way of expressing what we're talking about would be the idea of baby steps. Again, generally speaking, we get to a point where we need change, and that occurs gradually over time. And so in the same fashion, it is generally most healthy and most successful for us to make that change back to the direction we need to be in, and do it in a gradual fashion and baby steps, or targeting 10% change. And I know Anton usually, again, as part of our discussion, Anton is good at bringing out some of the data, but the data shows that if we go all in to make change and we're only 50% successful, that we are better off if we make maybe the 10% change and are 70 or 80% successful, and that has borne out to be true. Again, I remind you, I look forward to your comments or questions on the topic, because that keeps it more engaging, and especially when y'all are stuck with just me today and not have Anton to add to the mix. So share, if you would, about experiences you've had trying to change in a big manner wholesale, or kind of this turning over a new leaf about life or whatever in our lives, and how that went, and or if you have gone the other way and you have looked, practically speaking, use the 10% method, step at a time in an identified area. Share about your experience with that. I know for me that over time, I've tried a lot of different diets or eating plans to improve my weight. And that's been an ongoing challenge for most of my life. And what happens is when you go to these extreme diets, and it's very common that you cut out one thing, or in some cases you focus in on one type of food to eat most of the time. Real common now with, I know back in the day for me, it was an Atkins diet where you eliminated all carbohydrates and sugars and everything completely. And then more currently, there's a big focus on what's called keto, and I forget all the different names. But most of those times, and again, I've tried multiple approaches, most of those times they are effective for a short time. And what happens is I would be successful in losing weight, and we would, I'd drop pounds down and all that and feel real good about it. And that seemed to be all good and everything. And the challenge was that it would not sustain. And after going back to what would be a more normal eating pattern, or one that I am more comfortable with, then put the weight back on and back on the situation of fighting weight and having weight gain, and on most occasions end up with more weight than I was at when I went on this so-called diet, because it wasn't a gradual approach. It wasn't a gradual change. It wasn't real change. It was this all in or not at all type approach. Let's see. Sharon has a comment. She says, one thing that I've found myself in making changes, that if you try so hard to make a change, and it's important, if it doesn't come soon enough, we beat ourselves up. I've learned that baby steps is what you need to do, and one thing at a time. It will happen maybe slowly, but you will see changes. Yeah, I appreciate that, Sharon. That is generally the way it works in a more healthy fashion. And when we make those gradual changes and it becomes habit, then it lasts longer and works better. Professor Jagdish has a comment. It says, change is the only thing that is a constant in this world. Our preparedness to face the change and our adaptability to the changing environment are essential to have a positive outcome of the change process. Very much so. We have to be adaptable. Agile is the current favorite term for that. But we have to remain agile. We have to remain resilient as part of making these changes successful. So again, focus in on 10% or baby steps. Figure out, first of all, what is the root of the problem. For example, with dieting, quite often the problem with our weight and the way we eat is not driven by it's not a food motivated issue. We like taste of food and all, but we eat poorly generally the wrong stuff out of balance and the wrong volume. And it's because there are other root issues involved, such as maybe mental, emotional things that we are trying to resolve using food. And when we begin to address those things and make baby step type changes, what happens is we begin to be successful and moving forward. And the part of the value is if we go all in, and that our goal is to make that all in change, we will become discouraged more quickly because it is not practical to make that kind of change. Whereas if we make small changes, we have a greater likelihood of succeeding in those first small changes. So we begin in a successful way. We are starting off encouraged rather than discouraged. Let's see. Rafia makes a comment. If it is a diet, we go all in all of a sudden, then we get tired, not seeing results, and we probably end up gaining back any of that we lost, if not more. Indeed, we make this big change. We're going to only eat healthy, and quite often we throw in a gym membership, or we're going to walk 2 miles every day or whatever. And what happens is when we don't immediately see results like we think we should with such a great change, we become discouraged. Whereas if you take that 10% approach and you make a small change, first of all, it is sustainable because it's more likely that rather than making this big leap of doing movement or exercise 7 days a week, we say, okay, I'm going to start out by, who knows, we might even say 1 day a week, I'm going to make intentional decisions to be active. I'm going to have movement in my life 1 day a week. And we are more likely to have success 1 day a week and then be encouraged. And if we go from no activity to 1 day a week, we will begin to see change. It's going to be gradual. It's going to be slow. It's likely to be healthier, but we will then experience success in that small step. And as we do that consistently for a time, then we are then motivated to go, okay, I have done 10% change for a period of time. I'm seeing some improvement. I have been able to adjust my schedule for that. So I'm going to take the next step, and I'm going to go, rather than 1 day a week, adding in action or movement or exercise, whatever term you like to use. If you will do that, then when you take the next step, it will be a gradual process. You will be encouraged because you are successful. The reason that we get discouraged is that when we start and it's all in or nothing, we're looking for massive changes in terms of weight or health or whatever we're talking about. And when we don't see it, psychologically, it is defeating. And as a result, we tend to give up. And so, let's see here. Sharon makes a comment. She says that, excellent point. I've had that happen to me more times than I'd like to admit. Most of us have had that experience, Sharon, that we have had that experience of frustration and giving up. That's why, for example, the idea of doing New Year's resolutions is always a bit questionable in my mind. Doesn't mean that we can't determine to make changes as a part of our new year. But the key is not trying to change our entire life or turning over a new leaf, if you will, because we generally cannot, will not be able to maintain it. And so when we go from start out at for exercise or movement for 7 days a week is our target, and that's that big change. And then the first time we fail, we think, this is not going well, but I'll keep trying. And even at 6 out of 7 days, it's still a far reach way to change. And then the next thing we know, we're missing another day. And what happens is, as a result of that, we begin to get discouraged pretty readily. Whereas if we say, okay, I'm going to add in movement or exercise for 1 day a week, and we're able to sustain that for a longer term. And as we do, we obviously get the benefit of the exercise or movement, but the fact that we can maintain that 1 day a week for a period of time then encourages, okay, I've been able to do this. It's feeling better. Things are improving. So I'm encouraged that let me try adding a second day, and so on. And what happens is that we are able to have encouragement. We're seeing change that is sustainable. And as Rafia comments, that's so true. Consistency is important. Part of the problem is when we do this all or nothing approach to change, it's hard to remain consistent with it because it has to be supported mentally, emotionally, and, by the way, by our lifestyle. Lydia has a comment. She says, change is great. Unfortunately, if that change involved and against our faith, we need to refrain from the change or practice that leads to disobedience towards our faith. We must be aware of the consequences as well. We need wisdom in the choices that we made. I just encountered a scenario that was against my faith, knowing the truth and consequences later on. We must know our value and self-worth. Indeed, part of the biggest part of our battle is our value and our self-worth, and being able to reinforce that in a positive way rather than a negative way. And when we try to make these changes that are radical, then it is difficult, because when we don't succeed in this radical change, then it will cause us to even question our value and self-worth. Well, maybe I can't do this. Maybe I'm not up to it. I don't have the character or the strength to make this change. And it's more because of we're trying to make a massive change all at one time, rather than we are making a change and we're doing it in small steps. One that I have seen a lot of, and that, speaking of from a spiritual standpoint, as Lydia has raised, is that we know that as Christians, that taking time to read the Bible and having that as part of our life is a very important thing. But we go from not reading our Bible or reading it only very occasionally and say, okay, I'm going to read the Bible every day of the week and take the time and do this. And I even maybe we'll have a book we'll use, or a pattern or a method. And so we start off and we are going great guns for a time, but then in a short period, all of a sudden, rather than reading every day, we're down to 5 days or 6 days. And then because again of our circumstances, our environments, our priorities didn't change. We were just trying to change a behavior, and we began to get discouraged, and we began to say, oh, well, I just can't do this, and I must be too weak in my faith, whatever, and we become discouraged. Whereas if we approach with this 10% method, 10% principle of how to bring about change, and we go for several weeks, say we make sure that we're going to read our Bible once a week, every week. And we do that for a time because most of us are able to make the change or add change our schedule to prioritize to be able to add that activity in. And as we do that for a longer period of time, first of all, we're getting the benefit of our reading and what we learn. But more as important is that we are gaining a measure of success or accomplishment, which then helps us to feel like we are more capable, we have strength. And then within that new vein, we begin to go, okay, let's go to twice a week. And after a period of time, we get twice a week and we're successful in maintaining it. We are consistent, as I believe it was Rafia mentioned, and we start moving forward. Then we are basically modifying our behaviors in such a way that we are creating a new priority in our life. And so as we do so, we gain success. We began to be consistent with those 2 days a week. We then have encouragement to then make it to 3 days a week, and so on. Part of the key, though, and this is something that really have to consider, and that is that we start out with an area that gets to the root cause of why we need the change. And that's important. Anton and I talk about this in dealing with stress, that we need to identify what are our stressors, what are the root causes of that stress first, because if we don't go to the more troubling areas, the areas that give us the most struggle, and start there, then the change we're going to see with our gradual change, or the improvement that we're going to have with our gradual change, is not as great. So again, be purposeful in what we are trying to in areas that we're trying to make our 10% change. Welcome, Jander. Welcome, Razim. Appreciate your being here. Look forward to your comments, questions. So the idea is, when we can identify the area, the root cause that is creating the consequences of what we are unhappy about or have need of affecting, and so we pick the area that is the most impactful, we then make a decision to make a 10% change. I find the area that is a root that is the most dramatic about why we are where we are, that we don't want to be and we want to change. And then we began to take a 10% approach to that change. The smaller steps going to have a greater impact, which is going to then encourage us to keep making those steps. I believe that one of the things that people say is that that first step is the hardest. And I tend to agree that when we make an intentional change and we approach that area of greatest significance, the root cause, and we make that first step, quite often that is the hardest step. But if we, rather than make a first step, then we leap off the top of the building, so to speak, or off the ledge, and we make that leap and we don't land well, then we are discouraged more than before, and our value as a person comes in question in our own mind. And so that's why this whole concept of, rather than an all or nothing change, we want to take a 10% method approach. We want to identify what is the root cause. Why have we gotten to this point? Not the symptoms, because quite often we look at symptoms and the symptoms are not the problem. There's whatever is at the root of it. And when we identify that root, we and make a change, a 10% change in regards to it, then we have made a change in our life that is more likely sustainable, and in small steps is more impactful. For example, if our change, go back to exercise or action or movement, if we decide, okay, the reason that we haven't been able to invest in action or activity or movement in our life is because of our schedule's way too busy. And so we did, rather than say, okay, I'm going to take 30 minutes a day for 7 days a week, and that's going to be my commitment. If we rather say, okay, I'm going to make a set aside 30 minutes one time a week and be intentional about movement, exercise, whatever we want to call it, then it is, first of all, more likely that we can make that time adjustment and figure out how to replace the investment in that time that we've made. And once we do that and we begin to see a success, we then are able to, at that point, make a successful change. And since we're targeting the area that is our greatest root cause, then that change in that area is more impactful. We see more improvement. We see more successful change. Sharon makes the comment. She says, the first step is the hardest. I'm trying to make that first step now. Once again, I have a habit of jumping right in, and that's no good. I wind up getting upset if what I set out to do doesn't happen, and I go back to square one. It really is true, Sharon. In fact, I think sometimes we can go, not only go back to square one, we go backwards because we become discouraged, and then we were more discouraged before we tried to make the change than when we made the change, and we end up in a worse state, mentally, emotionally, as well as whatever physical consequences. Jane has a comment. She says, I live from the Bible verse Philippians 4, 6, and 7. We're told explicitly not to worry. For me, it is a matter of having unwavering faith and letting go of my perceived anxiety. It helps me tremendously. I'm with you, Jane. Learning to have faith as part of the change process really does matter. That's why, as Anton and I are always talking about, is holistic health. We say, okay, well, I'm not healthy physically, so I'm going to make a physical change, but I'm not healthy also in that related area in my mind and emotion, or in my spiritual state. And as a result, we again lose out, and it will create, and you bring up anxiety. Part of the problem is when we make this massive change and it doesn't go well, then it will add to anxiety. And we know from the wisdom of the Bible that anxiety is something we're not designed to experience and deal with on an ongoing basis. In fact, anxiety is related to stress. And so, again, it all fits together, and we have to have the various pieces as part of it, including our faith and the principles involved in our faith. So thank you for bringing that up. Lydia makes a comment, says, I found that with sound intuition, it leads to clarity in the choices that we've made. Let our intuition guide us through the journey of change. Indeed, intuition or gut, whatever term you like to use, is part of what will help us to identify what are the root issues, rather than dealing with the symptoms. And then once I go back, when we identify the significant root cause, and then we make a choice to make change, and that is a 10% change. We're not going from 0 to 100. We're going from 0 to 10. And by making that change, we begin to address the reasons that we are where we are, needing the change to start with. And as we are successful in that initial 10% change, and it's targeted at that important root cause, the impact of only 10% change can be even quite remarkable, to a point of being even a greater impact or an improvement than if we attempt to make 100% change in everything and we're not successful. And so, again, the principles are very valid and very important. One of the other things that, again, a principle of change that's important to understand is we are more likely to be successful in change if it's based on what am I going to move towards. And so let's take the area of eating. We know we need to improve our eating. So we determine that we need to make that change in eating. And we make that change based on eating healthier. And then we determine that we will eat one meal that's focused on being healthier, rather than what I can't have, what I should not give up. Just say, for one meal a week, I'm going to focus in, and that meal is going to be a especially healthy meal. Whatever that looks like, we each need to understand our own balance based on our own bodies. But we make that change, and we eat. So again, we're not talking about what we can't eat. We think about, what can I eat that will be healthy, and it'll even taste good. And we do that, and we are successful in making that change for one meal a week initially. And we began to realize, hey, first of all, I can do this. I am making a successful change. Second of all, you know what? This eating this healthier food actually tastes good. It's not something that is a punishment, not something that I'm doing without, but something that I am focused on changing, not changing from, but changing to. And that becomes an important part of this 10% change. And by the way, whatever we decide to change will give us an emotional focus on that change. And if our change is and has an emotional focus on what we can't eat, then we've got a negative emotional focus. And is going to probably mean that we are so focused on what we are having to do without, then it becomes a sense of loss rather than a sense of gain. And so, as part of the 10% change and dealing with the root issue, then with our emotional focus in a negative fashion, that's going to likely lead us to defeat. Whereas if we say, I'm going to eat this good tasting, healthy meal one time a week, and as we do that and be successful with it, we'll begin to go, wow, this feels good. And I'm motivated to, with this success, to maybe change and do 2 meals a week that are healthy. It's not what I about what I can eat, it's what I can eat. What can I eat that's healthy? And I can eat it in reasonable amounts. And so as we do that, our emotional focus changes, and therefore that focus drives us towards a greater possibility of success on a consistent basis. So, again, this principle of change is very important, and wholesale change is not generally the way. Sharon makes a comment that she says, Kevin, exactly. That's where I am now, and I have to just stop, go back, and try again. Now, sometimes what we have to do is give ourselves permission to give up on this all or nothing approach to change and just recognize that it's not likely healthy, it's not likely sustainable, and give ourselves permission to go, okay, it's time to reset. And as I reset, I began to figure out that I need to eat healthier. And for me, and this is something I've learned over the years of trying lots of different dieting processes and so on, that for me to eat healthy, I know that there are a couple of things that make a difference that if I do them, then I will be successful. One of those is not eating 3 meals a day, but rather eating consistently 6 times a day. And then I also know that part of the change is that in order for me to eat healthy, I need to focus in on protein, in fact, significant amount, as well as focus in on green vegetables. And then if I'm going to eat carbohydrates, I even went so far as to learn that carbohydrates, there are not all carbohydrates are created equal, and that there are low glycemic carbohydrates that I can still enjoy, but have an improved effect because they are more healthy than the high glycemic carbohydrates. So what I focus in on, what can I do? What can I eat? Rather than what do I have to do without? And therefore create a different emotional focus. and I created a positive emotional focus that will feed on itself. As we begin to see the changes, the emotional, and we see that change consistently, and we see benefit from the change, then we are able to go, okay, I've made that 10% change in this area. Maybe I need to make 10% more change, or it may be that we need to go back and find another root cause that has contributed to the problem I am trying to address. And in that case, then make a 10% change in that area. One of the things that is a combination that factors is, again, from a weight loss or physical maintenance, is the quite often the two things that factor in are our physical activity and what we eat. So initially, maybe we make a 10% change in what we eat. And in a matter of time, we've consistently been able to make that change. We began to focus on the good food, the good tasting food that we can eat. And we began to see that happen in a good fashion. And then we go back and say our second area of change is related to movement or exercise. And at that point, we say, okay, along with eating that one healthy meal a week, I'm going to add in one time a week, 30 minutes of movement, walking, running, gym, whatever that is for you that fits based in your lifestyle, based in your habits, based in your preferences. And then you begin to see success, both in keeping up with it, being consistent, but then the byproduct or the consequence that it has on our physical health. We begin to be encouraged by that. So let's see. Lydia has a comment. It says every change or decisions that we made must not be against our inner peace. Any decisions that doesn't give us inner peace is a big no. Our inner peace and mental health are our priority. Indeed, if we seek change that disrupts our peaceful behavior, our peaceful attitude, then the likelihood of success with that is going to be small, because part of the way we are designed to be is to be more at peace. Please understand that doesn't mean the absence of conflict, doesn't mean the total absence of, in a global picture, total absence of war and all that. That's not what inner peace is about. But it's important that our inner peace be considered as we make these changes. Let's see. And Sharon liked the idea of a reset button. Sometimes we need to pause, hit reset, and then start over again. It's okay. That's necessary at times. So again, what we're talking about is that too often that we approach change in our life with an all or nothing concept. And the problem with that is it's not sustainable. And then because it's not sustainable, the result we see is not enduring. And so the key that we need to have in our approach to any change is to identify the most important change first, which is what area, if we change, is going to have the greatest impact. Secondly, then we determine how can I approach this with the 10% method. What can I do that will be a 10% change related to this root cause? And that way we gain the biggest impact. And then the other part is, what am I moving towards? Not what am I giving up? So focusing in not on what we will not be able to do or have or whatever, rather focus on what I can have or do that will be a part of me, and that will make my emotional focus, my emotional energy in a positive way. And as a result, then we're more likely to sustain it. And it also helps us maintain a hopeful outlook. And the result is an actual change occurs, not just some dramatic event that we're trying to do. Most of our life is not about events. It's not the big things, generally speaking. It is the day to day, step by step movement or decisions that we make that make us successful. And it's very important that we understand that, being gradual and being the 10% approach. So, again, as you see, we need to make these changes gradually in a 10% fashion that helps us sustain it initially and longer. And as a result, we have a better chance of moving forward consistently so that we can be successful and sustain and be consistent with it. So, again, gradual change, gradual movement, changing in the areas of the greatest impact so that we are encouraged to keep moving forward. That is the key. That is the principle that we're talking about that is related to the 10% principle, concept, method, however you like to phrase it. Very important. When we do, we're more likely to bring about consistent, real change that will accomplish what we're after and keep us moving forward successfully to real change, which then hopefully we're making choices towards healthier decisions, healthier priorities. So, all or nothing change, not a good method, not a good way. Generally, it is not successful in either achieving the goal or being consistent and becoming a new part. Whereas if we approach things in a 10% fashion, we're more likely to be successful in a sustainable way, and we are moving towards something rather than focusing on what we can't do or can't have. All part of the process of real change. So I hope that our discussion today has been helpful for you to be able to consider about real change that is enduring and that will cause us to improve and grow where we need to. So, unless there are other questions or comments, I think we've covered the topic pretty well. I hope that you're taking away something of value today. We'll be back next Tuesday, 8 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time, and we'll be tackling another topic. If you have a topic that you would like to address or you think would be valuable, let us know. We will definitely consider that, and it makes for a good topic. So, God bless everyone. Have an amazing week, and look forward to seeing you back next Tuesday on the Human SOS Show. Hopefully, you'll follow hashtag Human SOS, become part of this movement so that we can help create a more sustainable human world that we live in. So take care. Thanks for everyone, and we will see you later. Bye now.